Okay, cool. It looks like we went live. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. This is another Friends of Haystack Rock, World of Haystack Rock Library Lecture Series. It's our extended series focused on Tufted Puffins. So I'm really excited to join you guys today. It's a beautiful day in Cannon Beach. And yesterday we had our World Oceans Day beach cleanup in partnership with Solve. And it was, geez, just a gorgeous day to be out on the beach. There was actually not a whole lot of trash picked up, which is a great thing because we don't want trash on our beaches, but there still definitely was some stuff out there for volunteers to pick up. And we are so thankful that so many volunteers did come out and celebrate World Oceans Day with us. We even had some tufted puffin sightings, which was really cool. Tiffany and I were trying to get them in the spotting scope, but of course they were not cooperating with us. So we did see them in flight, which was a lot of fun. I think my max number at one point in time was 7 individuals. One flew up to a burrow and then just got kicked right away from the burrow. So they're out there and they're fun to watch. So that was a day to celebrate yesterday. And we also have our photo contest still, and that ends July 15th. And the theme for that one is Let Her Fly, focusing on migratory birds that breed on Haystack Rock. So today I'm very excited to welcome our guests, Amy and Amanda from the Salish Sea School. They have a great program for us about tufted puffins that I'm so excited about. And just a couple of things before we get going, please make sure to put any notes or comments or questions that you have in the chat and Facebook there, and we'll make sure to ask them at the end of their presentation. And definitely check out what they're doing too on their Facebook page and everywhere. It's pretty exciting. I wish I could go to outdoor school again and see all the cool things that they're teaching their kids. So I am going to go ahead and mute myself and turn off my camera and turn over.
Hey, thanks, Hannah. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us, and we're just excited to be part of Friends of Haystack Rock lecture series. So as Hannah said, if you guys have questions, please type them in the comments if you're on Facebook or in Zoom in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of the session. We're excited to hear them. We love questions. So we're excited to talk about tufted puffins in Washington State, so just a little bit north of you guys. My name is Amy Eberling, and I use she, her pronouns. I spent over a decade bringing science alive as a high school biology teacher. And then after experiencing the power of hands-on learning and the ignition of all the senses in the outdoors, the dream and pursuit for an outdoor-based school began. So began the Salish Sea School. I'm the founding director and fiercely passionate about cultivating student leaders in marine conservation through unique and purposefully tailored programs that are on or near the water. These programs are designed to bring marine science and research alive in ways that really inspire personal conservation. That's our goal. It's my privilege to also introduce you to one of our incredible team members and educators, Amanda Colbert. Amanda is so passionate about educating people of all ages about the diverse marine wildlife in the Salish Sea and the importance of providing them safe and healthy habitats. Our goal is to get kids excited about birds and bring them in the bird conservation conversation. This includes an intense focus and development on a student research project on the endangered tufted puffin population at Smith Island in Washington. So I don't know how many people have actually come up to this area, so I'm going to provide a brief introduction and background into the Salish Sea. So many are familiar with the name Puget Sound, but the Salish Sea, the name is relatively new. The name Salish honors and pays tribute to the Coast Salish people. It's a group of ethnically and linguistically related indigenous peoples on the Northwest Pacific coast, made up of many tribes with distinct cultures and languages. They have been here since time immemorial, and they are truly the first stewards of the area. They have a long history of knowledge from hundreds of generations of ancestors about how to best use the resources of this land. Our school in this map here, on this map here, is the red star. It's located on the Salish Indian Nations land. And this is people past and present, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the Salish tribe. So diving a little bit deeper into the Salish Sea, where did that name come from? Well, the name was proposed by a marine biologist by the name of Dr. Bert Weber in 1988, so quite a long time ago. This was during a time of growing public concern over bringing super tankers into these inland marine waters. So the threat convinced the state and federal governments to quantify marine resources among these tanker routes. So scientists from Washington Department of Ecology began an extensive study of shoreline organisms, and NOAA began a study called the Marine Ecosystem Analysis Program to describe the ecology of the areas most at risk from an oil spill. What was really cool during this study is that they found an integrated inland sea, a connected ecosystem that wasn't previously described. So here you can see the amazing watershed that is the Salish Sea that includes the mountains and all the rivers that flow into it. And the foundation of this ecosystem is that interaction between freshwater discharges from the rivers and the saltwater from the Pacific. It's truly a unique bioregion, truly unlike any other place on Earth. And when the freshwater rivers flow into the salt marshes, wetlands, and bays, they bring important nutrients collected from the fertile valleys they flow through on their way down. So on the right, you can see a small glimpse of the fresh and saltwater mix that's happening. The blue are those and wonderful, huge freshwater rivers that are coming into our area. So the name the Salish Sea was officially adopted by the governments of BC and Washington in 2009. This name now can help with international policies and regulations. So what happens in Canada affects the same ecosystem and organisms in Puget Sound. So that's really why the name Salish Sea School came about. So it takes place on or near the Salish Sea. Here you can see we span from K through 12, the age range, and are going to start adult programs as well. So if you zoomed in on that red star, you'd see it located in an area or city called Anacortes, Washington, and it's known as the gateway to the San Juan Islands and the perfect location to launch from to explore. So students that come on board with us have the opportunity to experience orcas and river otters, harbor seals, puffins. We have a very interesting horned puffin guest that comes to the island that we'll be talking today. So he's little, or she is a little lost, but continues to come. And harbor porpoises and just many incredible marine life. And most of this marine life is seen within an hour of our launch site. So it was only natural to make this area our classroom. And what could be better in our eyes than an outdoor classroom? So the mission of the Salish Sea School is really to create student leaders in marine conservation through place-based experiential outdoor programs with a focus on adventure, research, and a huge portion is action. What can you do to make a difference after you learn about these incredible marine animals that depend on a healthy Salish Sea? So we offer a wide range of programs, but it's our flagship student program. It's a boat-based program that's called Guardians of the Sea. And this trident is our little symbol there to represent each student being empowered to protect the oceans. And this program is the one that goes to a really special island called Smith Island that we'll be talking about today. It's one of the last remaining breeding islands in the Salish Sea. So the Salish Sea School, you could say, we're on a pursuit to help save Washington's endangered tufted puffin population. And we do that through promotion of stewardship during our experiential student programs, increasing public awareness through educational programs like this. And we also work with scientists in the area that don't have all the time and resources to go out on the water. We empower students with the guidance of these scientists to help with tufted puffin data collection at Smith Island. So can we start talking about puffins yet? Yes, we're going to introduce you to our puffin community science research at, again, one of the last remaining interior breeding populations that goes to Smith Island. Smith Island is a long way from land. Here you can see the sandy cliffs, and at the very top underneath the grass, the brown grass, are burrows. And it's so isolated, which is why tufted puffins like it. So I'm so excited to introduce you to Amanda, who's going to give us some incredible information on Tufted Puffins' natural history.
Yeah, so thanks for turning it over and getting us started, Amy. I want to backtrack just a little bit so that you guys have a really good foundational understanding for what we're going to walk through when we get up to the tufted puffin portion of the talk tonight. So I thought that I would just say a few words about some of the verbiage that you'll hear, seabird, marine bird, pelagic. What do these terms actually mean? And so the difference between our seabirds, our marine birds, and our pelagic birds are pretty simple. So our seabirds are mostly pelagic anyway. Our tufted puffins especially are those birds that are only going to return to shore for nesting and breeding purposes. Otherwise, they live their entire lives out in the open ocean, salty water, marine environment. When we say marine birds, especially here in the Salish Sea in the wintertime, we get this amazing influx of migratory species that come spend the winter with us. They like protected bays and areas where they can find food resources. They blend in pretty well on our gray days up here in this area. But then during breeding season, when it gets warmer, they're actually taking off for fresh water. So they're looking for interior bodies of water, lakes, streams, ponds, to meet up, mate, lay eggs, and care for their young. So they do kind of bounce back and forth between two different water resources, both salt and fresh water. Whereas our seabirds, our pelagic birds are not going to come inland to the interior to use those fresh bodies of water. Now, all of them, no matter what type of water they're using, are specially adapted for this marine environment. So a few of the clips that I pulled here are from our tufted puffins. They've got these amazing webbed feet that help with paddling. They've also got these paddle-shaped wings, that act as flippers under the water to also help propel them with ease. And then all of our bird species that are marine bird or seabird are going to have some kind of special adaptation as far as their beak is concerned. And some of it is for prey load, and things like that. So we're going to get into the tufted puffins specifically in just a few minutes. But as far as regular or the average seabird characteristic goes, they're a lot different than maybe our terrestrial species or our passerine species, our songbirds. So they have very long lifespans. And when I say long, I'm talking anywhere from 10 to 60 years in some cases. They also have a delayed sexual maturity. So instead of, being young and then quickly turning around a year later to be ready to breed and contribute, it can take them a few years before they're actually ready to reproduce. They do reproduce annually, but when they do, most of our seabirds have very small clutch sizes, which means possibly just one egg. So that's what's pictured here with our tufted puffin in the middle and then the common mirror on the right-hand side. They've got that one egg that they're going to take care of during the season. And then chicks also undergo a pretty long development period. On the tufted puffin side, that's actually kind of on the shorter side. I think it's around 6 weeks after the chick is born and provision that they're ready to fledge and go out to the open ocean. But there are some species of seabirds where it's just shy of a 365 calendar year before they're ready to take off. So very long period of time, a lot of energy that's going to be put into that chick from the parents. So much different than, some of our songbird species that within, a week or two might be ready to go. So I want to touch on the 4 species just briefly. I'm sure you guys are very aware you've got tufted puffin down at Haystack Rock, but we do have 2 other puffin species along the West Coast. So I wanted to talk to you guys about ranges. And if you're familiar with range maps, most of these here are going to show in orange the areas that these birds will come in to breed. So you guys will notice in almost all of these, a lot of these offshore islands around the Aleutians. And even when you get into the interior here, most of the sites that these birds are looking for are going to be outcroppings, kind of as far away from terrestrial predators and humans and activity as possible. Same thing along the Greenland coast up here in the Atlantic, which we'll also get to. So we have our horned puffin and our tufted puffin, and in certain areas, their range does overlap. We have had, like Amy mentioned, this rogue horned puffin that, I keep hoping we'll have another one show up so we know it's not out there by itself. But for the most part, they are actually more north of where we are and kind of off the Pacific coast up through Alaska, whereas our tufted puffins dip down here along the coast of California, the coast of Oregon, coastal Washington, and then we're lucky to have 2 sites on the interior of the Salish Sea where, at least on the Washington state side, where they're breeding. On the flip side, we have our Atlantic puffin, smallest of, the 4 puffin species here. They got their name based on their location, and I kind of already went over breeding and then where they're wintering, but there is a sizable overlap where they might be year round. And then we have this cute but awkwardly named anyway, little bird called the rhinoceros auklet that is considered part of the true puffin family, even though it's not reflected in the name. And their range also overlaps quite a bit with our tufted puffin population. So in the grand scheme of things, what exactly are tufted puffins and how do they fit into, this broader picture here? So here in the state of Washington, they're one of 73 seabird species that we have. And they're actually one of 2 endangered seabird species we have in Washington state. The other endangered being the marbled murrelet. For us, they're typically inland, so on the interior of the Salish Sea, typically by April, sometimes mid-April, through as late as September. I've seen them a couple of times after Labor Day, but shortly thereafter, most of them have transitioned and then are going to head out to open ocean. And so they're part of the Alcidae family. So, all these birds that I have here at the bottom, we've got our rhinoceros auklet, common mirror, pigeon guillemot, and then again, our endangered marbled murrelet. They're all kind of part of the same family when you look at the way that science has grouped them together based on similar characteristics. But our tufted puffins in particular, I'm sure you guys have seen the acronym TUPU. If you hear Amy or I use that shortening instead of the actual full word, we're referring to the same bird. We got there by taking the first 2 letters of both words and kind of pushing them together. But the average height, some adults can get up to about 16 inches, but on average, maybe 11 to about 12 and a half inches. And when I've talked to kids about the tufted puffin before, I tell them, imagine the size of an official, like an NFL officially regulated football. That's about the size of our tufted puffin out there floating on the water. Weight-wise, they're only about a pound, so 13 ounces to 17 ounces, which again, just for comparison, if you were to take a loaf of bread in a package, that's about the same weight as our tufted puffins here. And then their coloration is amazing. By the time we see them in April, they have this beautiful plumage, very bright white faces, these lovely yellow tufts that come off from their eyes back toward their head. They've got very bright colors on the beak, and it's going to change a little bit with age and with season. So breeding plumage is going to be on the left here, versus we actually really enjoy the season when they transition. For us, especially for surveying purposes, it's a lot easier to count birds who are at different stages of molting those feathers in ways, we know we haven't double counted, but it's also pretty interesting to see at the end of the season, some birds haven't molted or lost tufts or anything at all. Whereas some birds, like as soon as August hits, we've seen no tufts, their faces are starting to change. And so they're kind of getting duller. They're losing a lot of this bright color so that when they go back out to open ocean, they blend in with their environment a little bit more. So they're less noticeable. Wingspan, even though, they can only get up to about 16 inches, is going to be about 18.5 to 25. So almost double. And then just some fun facts for you guys. Top speeds, 55 miles per hour for these birds, which I think is amazing. They can stay submerged for about up to 2 minutes. And then their particular lifespan, when we look at seabirds on a whole, is going to be 15 to 30 years, possibly longer. I think they had a captive tufted puffin that was tagged and was not able to be rehabbed and released that might have lived to, I think it was like 32 years. So that's a pretty decent lifespan for a bird. And then they're also considered monogamous. So they rarely change mates, and they're going to go back to the same nesting sites year after year. They do lay that one egg per breeding season. If that egg fails for any reason, they're not going to lay another. They're going to wait until the following season to, go through that part of the process again. And on average, we're looking at about a 6-week incubation period where one of the parents is going to be sitting on the egg and the nest, keeping it warm. And then about 6 weeks, they're going to be going out to the ocean, collecting fish and bringing it back to that burrow. So tufted puffin colonies in Washington state. I just want to kind of give you guys the breakdown, or at least how the state has broken it down, and where some of the research is, really being focused. And so coastal Washington has many more breeding colonies, although I say, many more with maybe a little bit of hesitation. It's not like there's tons. But we do have a larger population of birds out along the coast than we do in the interior. And it's going to kind of be important to distinguish between the two, because on the next slide, I'm going to go over some of the historical data with you to show you how the trends in population have been declining over the years. So again, I want to talk about historical first and then existing, and I'm going to show you the context for both coastal and interior Washington. But if we start off with the coast, I want to get you guys kind of familiar with this key down here. Our size class, when we say that, we're referring to about how many individual puffins were recorded at these specific sites here. So if you're looking at this map, big purple dots like you'll see in map A and map B had somewhere over 10,000 individual puffins. Anything smaller than that, that's in the orange dot, somewhere between 1,000 and 9,999. The green would be 1 to 999. And then the little red dots have less than 100 birds at those breeding colonies. So same thing when we're looking at the interior of Washington. We're looking at the interior, the Salish Sea portion, specifically kind of around the San Juans. So if we go back to Amy introducing where the school was, map D here and A are going to be the same years, 1886 to 1977. B and E correlate with each other. C and F correlate with each other. So kind of walking you guys through the process, you'll notice that things really change, right? So in map A and map D, we've got, the first historical account, a pretty decent size as far as we're looking at breeding colonies and the numbers at those colonies. And then as we move through the timeline here, you guys are going to notice maybe not so much in B that a lot of the color has changed, or that breeding colonies have disappeared, but more so that they've shrunk. So we're going from, really large areas to, not so much. And then when we get to C here, you'll notice that some of them are just flat out gone, especially up here along the Nia Bay area. We had, a breeding colony that shrunk. We had one over here that disappeared completely. The trend follows on the interior portion as well. And here in 2007 to 2010, we're left with these two very, very remote islands that the most lay people don't have access to, that are pretty much the two interior breeding colonies that are still supporting the tufted puffins that are coming back to breed. So we've developed and kind of moved in, we've introduced, non-native species and other things that compete with space for the puffins, which I'll get into a little bit later. But slowly but surely, they've just kind of been pushed out to, the furthest outcroppings, the most private, and the places that haven't been developed or have been the least disturbed over, this period of time. So in the early 1900s, there were 44 active colonies between coastal and interior Washington. And then they took a dip. So from 1978 to 84, we went down to 35 active colonies. And as I mentioned before, most of the others started shrinking as far as number of birds at those sites. Then we get to the year 2007 to 2010, and we have dipped all the way down to 19 active colonies. And I'm going to put into perspective for you guys number-wise, what that looks like. So the trend we were seeing was, if you took the entire state of Washington, both the coast and the interior, we were looking at roughly 25,000 tufted puffins throughout the entire state in the early 1900s. We had a dip in that second bracket of research where they think we lost about 2,000 animals. So by 84, roughly 23,000 in the population here in our state. And then we have this huge dramatic drop off where they're pretty sure at the end of 2010, we had less than 3,000 individual birds. So not a whole lot of time went by through here. And then all of a sudden we had this giant drop in our population. So much so that, you know, we're looking at a 90% decline over this timeline for the tufted puffin. And I'm going to turn it back over to Amy to talk about what, you know, Washington did with those numbers and how the endangerment listing got created.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. So in 1990, the Washington Wildlife Commission adopted a listing procedures, and it was developed by a group of citizens, interest groups, and state and federal agencies. The procedures include how species listings will be initiated, criteria for listing and delisting, and public review standards, the development of recovery or management plans, and the periodic review of listed species. So before this, there's no conservation status nor legal protections for tufted puffins or management or recovery requirements for Washington's population. So thanks to an incredible team of scientists that really worked hard for many years to get the status report and the endangered listing going, we were able to finally get the Washington state population listed as endangered. So the first step was to develop a preliminary species status report. And this report includes a review of information relevant to the species status in Washington and addresses the factors that were affecting its status, or at least some guesses, hypotheses. And then there was a public comment period, and the department prepared the final status report and listing recommendation and presented it to our Washington Fish and Wildlife Commission. So they were officially listed as endangered in April in 2015. And so I'm sure you all know what endangered officially means, but the definition I like saying because it really, to me, expresses how dire of a situation it is. So endangered means a species native to the state of Washington, so state endangered, that's seriously threatened with extinction throughout all or a significant portion of its range within its state. And a lot of people want to know, well, what does the listing do once you get it for them? And really, the huge part is it provides more resources for research, increased public awareness for sure once it is state listed, perhaps critical habitat designation, and then also recovery efforts. And so recovery efforts includes preparation of a recovery plan. So Washington State made one in 2019, so pretty recent here. And they set specific recovery goals and objectives, and that's kind of what we tried to follow in the Salish Sea School to help with those recovery goals. Recovery plans also establish an implementation plan to reach those goals. Criteria for reclassification are delineated, and there's also priorities for research that are stated, education, restoration, and other relevant topics. So it really gets the ball rolling on identifying the species needs help, and it creates a team that's required to come up with these initiatives to help, which is really important for our state, and it sounds like for Oregon too. So recovery is defined by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as the process by which the decline of an endangered or threatened species is arrested or reversed and threats to survival are neutralized. So that's long-term survival and nature can be ensured. So in 2017, the minimum outer coast population, the count from WDFW was around 1,200, and that's well below the threshold recommended for long-term viability. And then to downlist puffins to threaten a minimum viable population size of 4,500 individuals is needed. So you can see we have a long way to go. And so that's why we are positive in what we are bringing, hopefully, is helping at least the momentum for this incredible species. And then I'm sure you guys know, perhaps if you're logging on, you know about puffins, but the concern for Tupu's future is not limited to Washington. So here you can see the range of tufted puffins and the status of other populations. So they're listed as endangered species in Japan since 1993. Environment Canada included puffins as a priority species in its North Pacific Rainforest Bird Conservation Strategy, and the government of British Columbia increased the conservation status of breeding populations from vulnerable to imperiled, vulnerable in 2015. And where you guys, Oregon, or wherever you're listening from, Oregon is considered critically imperiled. And the California Department of Fish and Wildlife lists puffins as a bird of species of special concern priority 1. So it's really interesting. No other states yet or Canada has listed them as endangered. So because their natural history is relatively well known, scientists think that tufted puffins can really signal deeper ecological patterns through subtle changes in their diet, behavior, or breeding success. Feeding high on the food chain provides a visible means for gauging a range of trends from plankton productivity to ocean warming to climate change. So Amanda's going to walk us through some of the recovery hypotheses that are listed in the recovery plan for causes of decline.
Yeah, thanks. So as Amy mentioned, it's been hard for scientists to really pinpoint or say, definitively that one thing is carrying more weight than another when we're looking at the cause of decline and then the things that are continually threatening the population. But just to kind of walk through some of these, I mentioned earlier, habitat loss was definitely one. And this is in several different ways. When we came into the Salish Sea, especially around the San Juans, some of those islands that were further offshore, and more private that these birds are looking for to establish breeding colonies. We developed them first and foremost. So, we introduced ourselves. But then we also brought certain species with us, especially San Juan Island, I can think of off the top of my head. There are Eurasian rabbits and Eurasian red fox that have been introduced on the islands over there. One you could consider a predator for the tufted puffin if, the fox could catch that bird. On the flip side, rabbits definitely aren't eating puffins. They're herbivores. But they are digging down in the ground and they're creating burrows and they're kind of excavating landscapes. So in this photo that's up on the slide, if you look at the left, that's how the natural landscape looked before rabbits were introduced into the area. And if you take a look at the picture on the right, you guys can see some of the marked differences as far as, what the land looks like now. With puffins digging into those burrows or using the same burrow year after year, if the landscape changes, it causes some confusion when they come back. They can also only dig down so far into, softer sediment before you're hitting rock or you're hitting other material that cannot be easily displaced by the birds. So therefore, an overpopulation or kind of an overrunning of some of these animals can definitely prevent puffins from coming back to breed successfully, and in fact have caused them to abandon most of the places around the San Juans. Another big factor that we're looking at pretty much for the entire food chain here in the Salish Sea is declining prey availability. And when we get down to it, the bottom, the foundation of our food chain is really what we're focused on. There's so many other things above plankton and forage fish that rely on those basic needs. That as these populations are declining or they're coming under some type of impact, it could be overfishing, it could be warming waters, it could be changing ocean conditions that happen, cyclically. There's a lot of different things going on with prey availability that are definitely impacting puffins and their availability for this prey resource. And so to talk a little bit more about that forage fish aspect, we have to talk a little bit about shoreline armoring. And that's something that actually happens quite a lot down here in Puget Sound. So with being an interior sea, we have a lot of different areas in Puget Sound all the way up the interior coast where shoreline armoring occurs. And so if you guys look at this photo here, that big concrete wall that's acting as a barrier between the land and the water is what I'm talking about here. And basically what's happened is in taking that armoring and taking that concrete or any other material that they're using to secure the land, they're removing vital areas that our forage fish come up into the near shore and oftentimes the exposed shoreline when it's at high tide to lay their eggs. So we're running into issues where, you know, these fish are kind of running out of options in certain places. And that's also going to be exacerbated in the future as we get into climate change and sea level rise. So on the next slide, this next segment here, I'm going to talk about what the coastal squeeze is, and this will kind of help put it in perspective a little bit more for you too. So on the left here, we're looking at a natural shoreline, and you guys can see the current sea level here in this photo. So everything about this is normal. We haven't changed that shoreline. We haven't armored it. We haven't altered it in any way, shape, or form. So the sea is going to naturally ebb and flow. We have high tide and low tide twice daily. That's its natural movements. When that tide comes in and it comes up the beach, some of those forage fish are going to come in, like our surf smelt and our sand lance, really like that higher area to be able to lay their eggs. And then when the sea comes out, that part of the shoreline is exposed, at least in this, you know, natural shoreline when we look at things. Now, if we were to leave everything alone, no armoring, nothing to create a barrier there, over time, the natural shoreline is going to, you know, creep up closer to land as the sea level rises. So we're looking at the future here. This could be, you know, in light of climate change. It could be in light of changing ocean conditions. This could even happen, you know, given certain years with different types of weather patterns, that water might be coming a little bit higher into these areas. So what's going to happen naturally is the forage fish are just going to adapt. They're going to start following that tide line higher and higher. There's no impediment there to keep them from being able to access that part of the beach that they're looking for. But when we get into what an armored shoreline looks like at current sea level, if we've got it armored, there's still a chance that some of those forage fish species can get up to the highest point where the tide will still recede a little bit. But if we add in the factor of what's going to happen when that sea level rises, what's going to happen is we've completely eliminated the access to the shore. So the water table will go up and down, but it will pretty much meet that seawall there, not exposing that upper shoreline or that intertidal area that these fish are looking for to deposit their eggs. Other things to keep in mind, and this is a big thing, are pollution and contaminants. And one thing I usually like to talk about with folks is, especially here in our area, so Puget Sound Basin, we see an average of more than 370 billion gallons of stormwater runoff coming from the inshore, making their way through fresh rivers, storm drains, and different things like that. And they're flooded directly into the Salish Sea. So this is untreated water. This doesn't go through a treatment plant. Anything that's in there, it could be trash that's carried into storm drains. Some people think that paint and oil, you know, are okay to dump down in there. Different things like that they're not filtered out. They're not treated. All of that water and everything that's built up in there, it could be construction site debris. It could be pet feces, you know, other nutrients that are, you know, more of an organic compound in other different wastes and things like that. All of these things are flooding into the Salish Sea, and they start in smaller increments at the bottom of the food chain, but they magnify as they work their way up. So it's definitely affecting our seabirds. It's affecting things higher on the food chain. And then for these guys, fisheries bycatch, especially historically, was one of the first things where we really saw the population declining. And it's because a lot of times when these guys leave and go offshore to winter, that's where a lot of the fishing hotspots are, farther offshore. Tufted puffins, you know, and a lot of other seabirds are not really equipped to know that those fishing nets are there. If those nets have gathered food that they're foraging on as well, it's very possible that they become entangled in these lines and then can't escape. And so unfortunately, we lose a lot of birds to drowning. Things that have been going on with fishery equipment recently, you know, they're looking at a lot of different ways to try to figure this piece of the puzzle out. Can we create better fishing equipment? Can we get better monitoring? Can we look at, some of the data, like Amy was saying, needs to be collected and observed when they might be here, and different things like that to kind of move that piece of the puzzle forward. Unfortunately, for the most part, a lot of what started with these big lines has kind of been reeled back in a little bit, regulated, but not every boat that goes out, as far offshore is capable of being monitored. So there are still some areas, where illegal fishing nets and different material are being used as well. So bycatch is still definitely up there when we consider threats and the cause of decline for these birds. And then, believe it or not, recovery of avian predators. So one species recovery story could have an impact on, the birds. And when we're out at Smith Island, there are actually a couple of man-made structures where we've seen bald eagles that have nests established there. They return year after year to breed as well. So we're seeing a predator and a possible prey coexisting in these areas, but we often wonder, are we losing any of these tufted puffins to the bald eagle? And so, back in 1972, they decided to fully ban DDT. It was kind of a long time coming. They were looking at the bald eagle's inability to actually be able to sit on those eggs without breaking the shell to be able to raise young. And so they banned that chemical. And by 2007, the bald eagle had made this beautiful recovery. But in the fluctuation of things, while the predator aspect was going down, this was kind of stabilizing, one variable of this puzzle, possibly for the tufted puffin. And now that we have more predator and our population of tufted puffins is going down, we often, have to consider this as a piece of the puzzle when we're looking at threats to these birds. And then Amy, did you want to talk about Peter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So we have a great video on our YouTube channel that introduces an incredible scientist, Dr. Peter Hodum. He's a conservation biologist at University of Puget Sound, professor and conservation biologist. So he does field research during the summer. But he was so excited to help us with this project, and we truly wouldn't be where we are today without him. So we encourage you to go watch that video. Introduces you to him, but he does a fabulous job of explaining the puffins of Washington State in 6 minutes. So he's the one that helped us develop the protocols. And so we're trying to mirror the same protocols that they are going to complete out at the coast, and then the other island that Amanda talked about called Protection Island. And all our data will go to them and hopefully be helpful in some way. So we have tried to play that video in the past, and it ends up just lagging a little bit because of the internet. So we encourage you guys to go to our YouTube channel. It's just the Salish Sea School. So what are we doing as a school with the students to help with some of the priority actions that are in the recovery plan? So one of the things we do with our Guardians of the Sea program is we try to fill in that data gap that I was just talking about. So Smith Island is in the middle of nowhere. We are situated at a great place to visit Smith. Depending where we launch from, it's about 40 minutes to an hour to get there. A lot of the scientists work in Seattle, and so it's a lot further for them. So we are able to collect data at this island that not a lot of scientists or researchers are able to visit as frequently. And we think it's really special that we bring students out to help with this data collection. So we do boat-based surveys, and Amanda's highest count last year was 24 at Smith Island. So that sounds very similar to what Haystack Rock is. I think you guys, someone said 30 earlier today, right now, but that might not be the accurate count. So Smith Island right now, it's estimated to be around 24 to 28, I think was WDFW's highest count in 2016. So we also take pictures of them and try to identify where they are in the water. So this is what we're working on this year, seeing if there's any trends, and then hopefully going into observing the forage fish at the areas that perhaps there are trends in the water. So we have a mapping specialist that's helping us put together this incredible map And also the Pacific Whale Watching Association is providing us with sightings as well. So whale watching trips that go out to see puffins, we're able to collect all the data and the GPS points and get pictures of the puffins from those that share it. So this map kind of shows where they're hanging out around Smith Island, if there's photos available or no photos, because our goal is hopefully to, it's a long shot, but identify individual puffins. Is there anything crazy happening? We saw one puffin with feathers in its bill from one naturalist that shared the pictures. So it's really interesting what we're finding out slowly. So we also try to take pictures of any fish that are in the bills. And this is important to understand what type of food puffins are eating. And so then we can look at what foods are they eating and how is that fish population, the forage fish population, doing in the Salish Sea. Peter shared with us that typically when they are carrying prey in their bill, this means that there is a chick in the nest because they usually feed themselves underwater. So carrying prey in the bill while flying back to Smith Island can signify a successful chick, which is super exciting as well. So we again send all this information to Peter. We are fortunate enough to go out all year long. So obviously January to March, there are no puffins there, but we still go out and do a bird survey. But we see the transformation, the brilliant transformation that happens. It still blows my mind every time we see it, that these creatures can do something so magnificent. But here you can see early spring on the left and then all the way to the fall in September. And it's just a lot of fun to witness this transition and show the students this. Here you can see a picture Amanda took yesterday. Were we on the water? And so this was exciting because this puffin right here had a little notch taken out of this yellow part that comes during the breeding season. And so we're excited about that. We don't know why that happened, but we should be able to recite this individual throughout this season. So that's something different for sure that we know. We'll be able to ID him, as Amanda said, when they transition. It's easier because some only have, you know, missing tusks, but a white face and all black face. But this right here will really be special if we keep reciting him, and we'll notate that and showing the students that Amanda wants to name him Half Pipe, which I like, because it looks like a half pipe. So we get on the water, we introduce students to these species. We have binoculars so they can see them. And Amanda takes pictures with her long lens, so she shows them that as well. But we really teach them about the factors of puffins declines, how students can help from home, even if it's as simple as not dumping, you know, like Amanda said, the oil down the storm drain, or, you know, recycling. Just simple things, or as involved as coming out with us monthly next year to help us with data collection. So we really want to get these students excited about birds. We love birds. We also have a shoreline exploration adventures program, so shore-based. And these younger students, we teach them all about the migratory birds because this is during the winter time. So, you know, we get some magnificent migrations that are coming in and get those students excited from a young age to hopefully then connect, you know, personal efforts at home. How can you help these birds? Really in a small way, but you know, every little bit helps. So what I mentioned earlier is we do an annual marine bird survey. So we go out monthly, sometimes twice a month, and we have GPS points, and Peter helped us develop these, the scientists we work with. And since we're going to Smith Island already, we decided to help collect all marine bird data. So right now we're doing GPS points and doing a circular radius count. So Amanda will identify birds and I will write them down. And so we're hopefully going to help Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife just get general trends. Again, they don't have the time and resources to do it as often as they would like to. So since we are already going to Smith, we're super excited to help report that data on the way. So, you know, from phalaropes to the marbled murrelets, it's been really fun and special to help. And again, students, we have a student training as research scientist program launching next year where they will be helping every step of the way with this project. So how can you guys help? Well, it sounds like if you guys are involved or watching Haystack Rock presentations, then you probably are, involved in Oregon, and we are so grateful for that. Every effort with puffins, because we're huge puffin lovers, and every state is helpful. So we're so excited, one, just to have you guys here and listening. We're also excited. We launched a little Adopt a Puffin program. So we made a custom stuffed tufted puffin that Amanda and I can never say. Stuffed tufted puffin. Try to say it later tonight and you'll giggle. So students named this stuffed tufted puffin. I actually have them here. This is a prototype. But they're coming in the end of June, and he was named by our students Tough Puff, just because, students thought that was funny. And so we'll do a different one, as soon as we sell out with these guys, and we'll do another Tough Puff. But we looked at the bill of the tufted puffin that we saw this summer and tried to make it just like that specific puffin. So all of the sponsorships will go to our research efforts and student programs. So there he is out on the boat at Smith Island with us. Other ways to help, simply subscribing to get our newsletters online. Sometimes it includes action items, ways you can help, new program releases. We hope to release some adult programs, so you guys might have a long way to drive for those, but we would love to meet you. Follow us on social media, Salish Sea School on Instagram and Facebook, and you can see this summer what our students are up to. Amanda takes some beautiful pictures, and she'll post the puffins that we do see this summer with the students. And then if you ever end up coming to the Salish Sea and observing tufted puffins at Smith Island, we love pictures. So if you get pictures, because we'll put them in our database and GPS coordinates, and we'll add that to our database. So citizen science is huge for us. And, as a nonprofit, we rely on our community and our village. So we always are grateful for every single donation or even volunteer. If you end up, coming up here, if you're from this area, please reach out, because it truly takes a village. And we are so grateful for all of you for listening in today, and just for your passion for birds and puffins. So we have our emails up on the screen there. If you guys have specific questions for Amanda or myself, please feel free to reach out. And we're excited to hear some of your questions now.
Well, thank you guys so much. That was wonderful. I had a question. Do any of the kids get seasick?
We had one student get seasick. I don't know. I think Eric was aboard, not Amanda. And it was at Smith Island. And it was like the flattest day in the world, but we had Dramamine on board and she was good. So we got her all set up. But that's a great question. Luckily, no one yet, but you're gonna jinx us, Hannah. So I'm not gonna knocking on wood.
I'm sorry, you'll be fine. Just have Ginger on board of some form, and
yes.
They'll be so involved in that.
Ginger, I need to add that.
So we did have Elizabeth Collins who commented that she didn't have a question, but she's intently listening. And the data being presented is so informative and shows how much of a crisis this is for the number of species. And she wanted to make sure that this was going to be shareable so she could watch again and take better notes. So you guys had some great information that folks really loved. And I think it was just so thorough that, we don't have any questions at this point.
Awesome. That's terrific. Well, thank you for your comments, the one that did write in. Hannah, did you record this to share? Or you said you'll put it up on YouTube?
Yeah, I'll put it up on YouTube. It's on Facebook Live, and I can just pull it right off of that. And just a fun feature for you guys. We're still on Facebook Live, but it does captions in real time. So you can actually go through it and turn the captions on, which I just noticed, which is super handy. So we'll be exploring that more, and I'm sure that'll be great for you guys too.
It'll probably be slightly entertaining as well because, you know, names and certain things we've mentioned today probably won't be transcribed correctly, but yeah, closed captions is awesome.
Well, thank you guys so much. And everyone, yeah, the Salish Sea School. And I can't wait for your adult programs to come out so I can go.
We did have one more question down in the chat. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, I didn't.
Hannah.
I missed it. Go ahead. So Angela asked, how long has the school been studying tupus? Has experience at the school spawned any new ocean biologists or bird researchers?
So we started research in 2019, or was it 2019? And we have, I'm sure all of you that are listening probably know, you know, when you love birds, like you love birds. There's no like real middle ground. And so we have some students that come, and I'm thinking of one in particular that she has loved birds her whole life and didn't really have a community to kind of express or share that love or joy with. And she has just been, from what her mom has told us, above and beyond to actually have a community of people that are bird nerds and love this. And so we're hoping to foster that. We have a small camp this summer called Puffin Protectors, and she's going to be a student leader in that for kindergarten, first and second graders. She's 11. So yes, the answer is yes. We have a lot of people that have fallen in love as soon as they see puffins. And then some students, you know, they love them, but they don't take that next step, which, as everyone knows, is just pretty normal.
I guess to add to that too, I've given the puffin talk as well. I work with another organization that primarily focuses on the whales of the Salish Sea, but we do a kids program. And I have just been so moved to start, you know, stitching these things together, since we're looking at an entire ecosystem that basically needs recovered at this point, that I felt like introducing this to, you know, our group of kids was one of those first steps. And it really is amazing how many people here in Washington State have no idea that we have puffins. They think you have to go to Alaska or, you know, go over to the Atlantic. Like the Atlantic puffin is like the icon for all puffins everywhere. We cannot find a whole lot of anything that has anything other than an Atlantic puffin on it. So we were very surprised at how little information is actually available. And then, you know, what we've presented to you guys is still pretty preliminary. Peter is actually going to come out on the boat with us in the next few days just to kind of shadow us. We wanted him to do that last year, but last year kind of became a bit of a disaster for all of us getting together. So our hope is that they don't have the reach and the resources right now to really do any studying or data collection at Smith. So, you know, our first idea was, well, any collection is better than no collection, but at the same time, we want to make sure that whatever we're collecting is usable, you know, and valuable to, you know, some degree. It's great to be able to go out there and spend time and introduce the kids to them. But I think our underlying, you know, goal is that we want to keep taking the kids out there to, you know, experience these birds. And eventually we would like to get some adult programs going too, so that the reach really starts growing. And, as Amy mentioned, it's a little newer for some of the tourist companies and the whale watch companies to be taking folks out in that direction. But because of the closure with the Canadian border and the pandemic, they can't cross in boats, whether or not they plan to port there. That's just kind of the lay of the land right now and the rules. So they've been kind of detouring and going to other places on quieter days. And we've been happy about that because they've been supplying us when we can't get out there, but they're also turning on, you know, brand new group of people who just might love to be out on the Salish Sea. And I know that I kind of worked backwards. You know, whales has always been my, you know, first and foremost. I'm the Free Willy kid from, you know, the 90s, but I found a fast love for birds. They're just amazing. And you look at both of those components and you can't really care about these things without caring about the whole ecosystem that they live in. So it's our hope that we will spawn, you know, new biologists and new bird researchers, or at least inspire some kids to take the next step and explore what that looks like in college, or what it looks like to be a field researcher before putting all your eggs in one basket.
Well, that's super cool. We had another question from Keith. So you mentioned about the listing and everything in Japan, but how is the Japanese government approaching the issue?
Oh, that's a good question. I have not looked into that at all, and I'm going to do that as soon as I get off here.
Yeah, I don't think I have a lot of info on it either. It struck me as pretty interesting that they, were one of the first ones to jump on board and list. I think we know a little bit more about, our population up the West Coast, but I would also be interested to see what exactly is going on over there. Although trends with a lot of, again, connecting back to whales, there seems to be a lot of different things that go on over there, and they're still able to take certain animals that we've completely done away with over here in the US. So different mentalities, different cultures, different traditions, and then where does the puffin kind of fall into place when we're looking at that? So you've given us homework, which is awesome.
Well, great. Thank you all so much. And you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you for tuning into the Friends of Haystack Rock Library Lecture. And we look forward to checking you out next month and for our next great talk. So thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for
Hannah.
having us.
Yeah. Take care.